Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex and my co-host Anthony Rivardo. Today we're talking the biggest priorities for the New York Giants this free agency period, who we think they should sign, what positions are really the most essential for them right now. But before we dive into all this good stuff, Anthony, how are you doing, my friend? And I'm going to actually give my joke first because I want to get your reaction. I always like to do that. This is actually a Giants joke. It's kind of funny. Did you hear about the new Plaxico Burress cocktail?
No, I didn't.
It's just one very expensive shot.
Okay. Do you want me to rate it? I'm going to give it a 7.
4.
I'm going to give it a 7. I like that one.
A 7?
That was pretty funny. Yeah.
It was a little edgy. It was a little edgy. Made me a little sad, though, you know. But as a good meme should, it should pull at different emotions. It brings back a lot of emotions just instantaneously when you think Plaxico Burress, because that year after the Super Bowl we could have doubled up. Unfortunately, the most expensive shot.
We could have had 3 lie. Now we have 2 lie.
The shot heard around New York, they call it.
Yeah, that is. I'll never forget that day either. And I was so young, but I still remember that day. I went to my grandparents' house the day that it happened, and my great grandpa, he was literally from Italy. He's an immigrant, or he was, and he throws down the newspaper and is yelling about this blanking idiot who just shot himself on the Giants. And I was like, whoa, what the heck just happened? Because I was so young. I was I watched football, but I wasn't super into football. But I could even tell that was a huge deal that this random guy just shot himself in the leg. So I'll never forget that. I have a crystal clear memory of my great grandpa just being pissed about that.
Oh, no, I know, because we used to play backyard football, I'm sure a lot of people have, and we used to call, when you jump over somebody and catch the ball over their head, it used to be called plaxicoing them, or plaxing them, kind of like mossing, you moss someone. Plaxico also had a couple catches like that, so we would call it plaxing, because I was a Giants fan, obviously, but it was good times. That was a tough one to swallow, just because of the implications it had on the next season for the Giants. But now we're fast forward to 2021, and here we are trying to figure out how we can piece together this team this offseason to put them in a position to compete for a playoff spot next year. It's going to be a 17-game schedule, so they have an extra game on the schedule, which means they really need to be a 10-win team to make the playoffs, in my opinion. The NFC East is not going to be this historically bad again. We're going to need to be competitive. We're going to have a much better squad to beat Washington twice in a row for a third consecutive season. We're going to need some better talent to beat Dallas, because they're obviously going to take a step forward. In my opinion, they will at least. And then the Eagles, they're kind of in a black hole with Carson Wentz's contract, but they always manage to stay competitive one way or another. So always something to be wary of. We just need to improve as a total team. But this free agency period, and we want to dive into this specifically because as Anthony mentioned before the podcast, the free agency signings really dictate how the NFL draft is going to go. So what we see the Giants do in free agency is going to give us a good indication if they're going to go wide receiver, they're going to go pass rusher in the first round, maybe go for a cornerback in the second round, a tight end. Who knows? So I think the number one guy in free agency, or at least the number one position, that's exterior from the Giants. I'm not considering Leonard Williams or Dalvin Thompson or retaining position guys like that. I'm going to incorporate just new faces. The number one position for me is wide receiver, hands down. And we made a video about this a couple days ago. 5 wide receivers. There's really 6 with Chris Godwin, but he's had a really tough postseason right now. He's dropping passes like crazy. They barely squeaked out a win against the Saints, So there's a lot of players that are going to be hitting the market, especially the wide receiver position. You got Allen Robinson, you got T.Y. Hilton, Larry Fitzgerald, he might retire, A.J. Green, someone I don't really want to touch, Sammy Watkins, Marvin Jones, Corey Davis, even John Ross, the speedster, 27 years old, could be a cheap guy. They could take a gander, take a flyer on and see, maybe he has some extra juice in his tank and they can extract some of that value that they've been missing. But Anthony, do you agree that the wide receiver position is really one that needs to be allocated, or resources allocated toward, so that we can bolster it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at the state of the Giants offense, they clearly lacked playmakers. Even Dave Gettleman and John Mara said that they lacked playmakers on offense, and it's something they're going to prioritize and try to fix in the 2021 offseason. And it's a rich free agent class for wide receivers. It's also a rich draft class. So if the Giants want to get a wide receiver, there's no excuses. They should absolutely be able to get one, And in terms of the current state of the Giants wide receivers. Like we have Darius Slayton, and Darius Slayton's very talented but very inconsistent. He was dropping passes. Maybe Giants fans set the bar a little too high. I always thought he would settle as a solid wide receiver too, and I think that's where he's now settled. He's definitely not wide receiver one material. I think a lot of Giants fans sold themselves that false hope in terms of Darius Slayton, but still Sterling Shepard is a good player. Sterling Shepard is going to be consistently good. It's like we have two really solid wide receiver twos on the roster. I'd say Golden Tate is actually a pretty good wide receiver 3, but if you can get 2 wide receiver 2s and then now in free agency find this wide receiver 1, you're talking about giving Daniel Jones the opportunity to really flourish next season, or really have a plethora of playmakers to throw to. And maybe Evan Engram can return to his rookie season form. Rookie season, he was, phenomenal. Like, there were teams that honestly just couldn't guard Evan Engram at times back then. He really didn't drop the ball nearly as much as he did this year. So if we can get better performance out of Evan Engram, assuming that the Giants are going to stick with Evan Engram, that's what I think they will do. And then, you get Saquon Barkley back in the fold. All you need is that number 1 wide receiver to just really take this offense to another level. And, the amount of points that we scored this past season, what was it, 17-something points per game, 18 points per game? Like, that is just atrocious. Yep. You can't win in the NFL with an offense like that. And getting a number 1 wide receiver for your quarterback to develop with going into his 3rd season, that's going to be the key to taking the Giants and making them a playoff team.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And really, they could go with a wide receiver in free agency and the draft. That is definitely a possibility. I could see them going for someone like Curtis Samuel, a speed guy, and then drafting like a big body like Terrace Marshall in the 2nd round. Or even the opposite, taking a big guy in free agency and then taking a guy like, Jalen Waddle with the 11th overall pick. Definitely a possibility there. We're going to obviously see how that unfolds. But I think this is a very good wide receiver class. There's a lot of different bodies, a lot of different talents that they could look to. And I actually kind of like the idea of giving John Ross a cheap contract. The guy has insane speed. Give him a chance. He's kind of like Darius Slayton in a way, but he has so much more talent as a former first-round pick. He's going to be cheap. He's kind of injury prone, so maybe he's someone that could, work his way up the roster and given a chance. But for the most part, they have a lot of ways they can go this offseason. It depends how much money they really do have. If they let Leonard Williams walk, if they let Dalvin Tomlinson walk. I saw one interesting argument that maybe, letting Leonard Williams walk, saving that $20 million, and then allocating as much as possible toward the offense, because the NFL is an offensive-driven league. Maybe that is the best decision to make. You can scheme a pass rush. You can sign or draft a big body to just clog up the middle and just flush your cash with the offense. And then you have Saquon Barkley. Then you have the money to sign Allen Robinson. You got DJ. You have a decent offensive line. You have Sterling Shepard, your number 2, Dante Pettis, and Darius Slayton. That's a pretty damn good group of players. And maybe you go out and you draft in the 1st round. Maybe you trade back and get the defensive tackle from Alabama, Barrymore. Well, I forget his name exactly, but a really talented player there. So there's so many things the Giants could do. You never rule out an interior defender with Dave Gettleman. We know how much he loves those guys. We know he will spend a 1st round pick on an interior defender when we all think he won't. But the reality is, if he doesn't give Daniel Jones more weapons, he's only going to get himself fired. You know what I mean? He's going to get himself fired if he doesn't give Daniel Jones the weapons. That was his pick. That is his quarterback. If he doesn't do him any favors, he's going to screw himself. So wide receiver is my number 1 position based on that fact alone. He needs to allocate resources there. They could go, if they get 2 wide receivers this offseason, I would be super happy about it. I think it really depends who, though, and it depends, how is Jason Garrett going to utilize them, because we've seen Jason Garrett in his play scheme. That's the big question. What kind of receiver, though, do you think would fit his scheme? Because we know he likes that Dez Bryant, big body, possession type of wide receiver who can win man coverage battles. That's what he likes the most. What kind of player matches up with that? I know you're going to say Kenny Golladay, so I can answer that for you.
Kenny Golladay. So that's my answer. Yeah, Kenny Golladay. I think when you look at the free agent class for wide receivers, especially with the Giants, I've mentioned this countless times, the Giants have known interest in Kenny Golladay. It is a known fact that they are interested in him. They tried to trade for him in October, at least called and asked what the price was from Detroit. So they have interest in Kenny Golladay, and I fully expect them to make a run at Kenny Golladay if he hits the open market in March. Because you do look at back when Jason Garrett's offense was really still fully in his control. Maybe he wasn't calling plays, but it was still more of his control. Over the past season or two, it became Kellen Moore's offense more. It was more of a collaborative deal with Kellen Moore, and that's when the quicker Amari Cooper wide receiver became the focal point of the offense rather than the bigger, stronger, make those 50-50 catches like Des Bryant. But I think that Jason Garrett's mentality is those big 50-50 ball wide receivers. That might not be my favorite thing, speaking from, because me, I like to look at the analytics perspective of it. I think route running is king over every other trait, but a lot of Giants fans really want to see a big body 50-50 ball wide receiver. And Kenny Golladay is that guy 100%, but Kenny Golladay also gets wide open and is a good route runner. He is just, but that's what makes him a wide receiver one, a guy who can go up and make those plays, but a guy who can separate and get open every single route that he runs, and runs a full route tree. So, Kenny Golladay, I think, will fit this scheme perfectly. But, you mentioned, with the Giants, they could sign a wide receiver and draft a wide receiver. I would be all for that. But that's just something I will never expect the Giants to do with Jason Garrett, because I think that this is an offense that absolutely wants to focus on the running game. And me, with my analytic perspective, I'm not so crazy about that mentality. But I think that's their mentality. I think they want to focus solely on the running game and make the passing attack the complement to the running game, when I absolutely think it should be the other way around. When you look at a lot of the most explosive offenses in the league, it is usually the other way around. There's a few, the Titans, Ravens, where it is the way that I mentioned initially, where the running game is a focal point and the passing game is complementary. But, then you look at the Chiefs and the passing game is obviously the focal point there. I'd even say the Bills, it's the focal point there, So there's a lot of different ways that you can construct the offense in the NFL in 2020, but I feel like, it's such a passing league right now, the modern NFL. It requires such a good passing game in order to get by and succeed and become one of the best NFL teams, So I think in terms of what will Jason Garrett do and the Giants, what will they do and what should they do, I would be all for signing and drafting wide receiver, just loading up with wide receivers and playmakers. I'm totally cool with that. But I just don't see them doing that. I see them getting one wide receiver and then maybe, getting a blocking tight end or something. And, and then I see them just really just continuing to focus on the defense. So that's what I think that they will do. But, I won't complain at all if they do get Kenny Golladay or any other number one wide receiver, because the Giants desperately need that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, when you look at other teams, especially the playoff teams right now, I've seen so many arguments that are like, you don't need a wide receiver one to win a Super Bowl. And maybe that was true in the past, but now I really do think you do. Look at Devontae Adams, what he's doing for that Packers offense. He's everything for them.
Look at what Stephon Diggs is doing for that Bills offense. Look what Tyreek Hill does for that Chiefs offense.
Stephon Diggs, yeah, you just mentioned him. Like that, these are players. And then you see, right? You see, can't guard Michael Thomas, who had a terrible game. He might still be injured, and I actually think he is. But those big number one receivers, they show up in those big games. That's what the Giants really need, though. They need those players that show up in big games, because we don't have that right now. You look at Evan Ingram, he could be that guy. He just drops the ball too much. That's his big con. He could be the guy that shows up in big games and makes those plays. And he knows it because he creates separation. He is a good playmaker from the tight end inline position and lining up in the slot, whatnot. He just can't get the ball in his hands and keep it there. That's his major problem. But when you look across the league, all these really, really talented teams that have very good offenses, they have number one receivers that are unique. They're just unique. Like Stephon Diggs barely ever drops the ball. He's a fantastic route runner, is fast. Tyreek Hill is arguably the best playmaker in the game, with his explosive ability and what he can do. And then you have Devontae Adams, who has the most unique release that you'll ever see. He's It's crazy because it's a cardinal sin to do a hop step as a release for a receiver, and he manages to incorporate it into his game and make him one of the best receivers because of that. He's the only guy who can really pull that off and make it the most important part of his game. And he just catches everything he throws away. Aaron Rodgers is just freaking amazing. It's just, when you have a good quarterback putting the ball in the right places and you have a wide receiver one, it changes the entire outlook of your offense. It changes the productivity. It changes everything, And we're going to I'm going to throw some clips in of all these guys that we're talking about in the video so you can get an idea of what we're talking about, just how unique they are and how special it is to have a guy like that on your team, and how it forces defenses to change their coverages and allocate more defensive backs, more guys in the box if you're just trying to stop a running back. Like the Giants had nobody that anyone was scared of. that was the major thing. They could just sit back and cover one, man up across the board, and then, let Wayne Gallman beat you. You know what I mean? Let Wayne Gallman beat you. That's what they did.
The most imposing threat that there was on the Giants offense in 2020 was when Daniel Jones had that tear of games where he was running the ball really efficiently. That was the most imposing threat that the Giants ever had this year, other than Saquon Barkley in week 1 and, 2 quarters, not even through week 2. So the Giants didn't have any opposing threats. You're right about that, and they absolutely need to find one in this offseason. That's where the wide receivers come in. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Just fix the offense, man. That's, we absolutely need that.
Yeah, and I feel pretty confident about our offensive line right now. Like, I feel like we're getting better.
It's
I feel
definitely
like
trending in the right direction for sure, but I wouldn't be against maybe picking another guard or even tackle somewhere within the first few rounds, or even definitely the later rounds of the draft. Just take some flyers on some guys. Yeah, I definitely think that there's room for improvement, but I do feel pretty confident about it as well, especially knowing that we'll have more continuity going into year 2 with this offensive line.
Exactly. The continuity is the big thing there. Like, it's the pass blocking that was a major issue. And if they can solve that, if they can fix that, we're in good shape. The Giants are in decent shape. The run blocking, not worried about, look phenomenal. I really do hope we keep Kevin Zeitler, though. He's that piece I don't think they can afford to give up. Even though the cap hit's a little bit significant. It's like $14 million, I think, but they have rookies scattered across the offensive line and such little money invested. Cut Nate Solder, save the money there. I think you keep Kevin Zeitler, in my opinion. But the pass blocking, if they can improve there, I think the continuity, 1 year of experience under Jason Garrett's scheme is going to go a long way for their pass blocking, which obviously is going to help Daniel Jones, one of the most accurate passers from the pocket with a clean pocket specifically. So that's something to consider moving forward. But again, wide receiver, super important. And, the number 2 position is going to be outside linebacker, right? Because we saw this past offseason, or really this past season, how important a pass rush is. What Patrick Graham managed to do with just practice squad players like Jabal Shared, 7th rounders like Carter Coughlin, Cam Brown, what he managed to do was simply mind-blowing. You won't see that very often from coordinators, be able to pull out magic like that from players that should not be producing at that point in their careers. It was special to see. Now, with that being said, they still underwhelmed. And I think this, positional group outside linebacker needs to get some upgrades. Obviously, you have Lorenzo Carter and O'Shane Ximines coming back, but O'Shane Ximines hasn't proven to me anything. The injury really hurt his progression. I don't trust him yet. Lorenzo Carter was picking up steam, really stealing the edge, looking good. Achilles injuries are extremely, extremely hard to come back from. That I don't want to say he's going to come back better. Maybe if he comes back the same, I would be happy about that. So we'll see what happens there. The free agent pool is better. Of course, you have the big names like Yannick Ngakoue. You have Bud Dupree, Melvin Ingram. There's some talented guys there, but the Giants aren't going to have all the money in the world to spend on an outside linebacker. One guy Anthony just wrote about, though, Hassan Reddick. This is a guy we should be keeping an eye on. He fits the perfect mold for Patrick Graham's scheme in the 3-4. He just made the transition back to outside linebacker. He actually came into the NFL. They tried to use him as a linebacker off ball, and it was very strange what they tried to do, because he was traditionally a pass rusher in college. They tried to move him away from that, but now they finally said to him, go back to your original position, and he picked up 12.5 sacks this past year. He had 5 sacks against the Giants. He set a franchise record for Arizona in that game, and he's a guy, who's not going to be paid big bucks. It was his first year really producing like that. Maybe they could sign him for a $7-8 million deal, maybe 2-3 year deal for $7-8 million per. I could see it happening. I could see them getting that done. He would fit perfectly in our scheme. But Anthony, what do you think about Hassan Reddick, kind of a low-key pass rusher that we should keep an eye on? He's also 27 years old, super young.
Yeah, I could absolutely see Hassan Reddick being one of the guys in free agency this year that gets a 1-year prove-it deal. That makes a lot of sense, because what happened with him is he was a dominant edge rusher in college playing at Temple, and then he gets into the NFL and they instantly just put him off ball. They make him an inside linebacker and have him, be an off ball linebacker, which is not what he knew how to do, which is not what he played in college. So they had him doing something completely opposite, learning a new position, and it didn't work out. And they recognized that it didn't work out, so they moved him back to the edge. And he started off slow, but the second half of the 2020 season, his first season playing the edge again, he really started to tear it up. I mean, Giants fans know he had 5 sacks against us in week 14, and then he had like a sack and a half the following game and a sack the game after that. Like, the dude just went off for a few weeks towards the end of the season, and that's
8
very
sacks
encouraging.
In 4 games.
Yeah, I know. That's nuts. And that's really encouraging too because he didn't know how to play that position anymore. You know, it's like he forgot it and he was rusty. But then he started playing it again and he started to ease into it. And then he started to play it really well towards the end of the year. Maybe he can build on that his second year playing edge rusher. And then, you know, maybe even a new team, a new scheme, a new coaching staff can even have him hone in those edge rushing talents. And put them out on the field at an even higher rate and be even better next year. You know, if the Giants, you know, we all love Patrick Graham and we know that he gets the most out of all of his players, right? Imagine he gets his hands on Hassan Reddick, teaches him how to be a dominant edge rusher again, and then he can just break out for the Giants on a one-year prove-it deal, and then we worry about maybe having him on the long-term contract the following season. I could absolutely see something like that happening. It's something that Pro Football Focus mentioned. They said that they could see that happening. They said one free agent for each team to sign. Hassan Reddick was a free agent that they chose for the Giants, you know, and we're familiar with him because he completely tore us to shreds in Week 14. But we know that he has the potential to be a really good pass rusher. You know, any pass rusher that has a game like that has the potential to be a really good pass rusher. It's all about putting it together and being more consistent. And I think that pairing him with Patrick Graham, that's exactly what we could get out of him, a more consistent and better version of Hassan Reddick.
That's exactly right. And what he did in the second half of the year was simply unbelievable. You know, it was actually a 3-game stretch where he had 8 sacks, which is stupendous. You know, in that same scheme, that same little time frame, he had 21 total tackles. The guy was absolutely all over the field. Oh my God. I mean, I'm just looking at his second half stats right now, and it seems like he really started to take to the scheme in the second half of the year. And that tells us something really good because the Cardinals play a 3-4 scheme. You know, it's very similar to ours in a way. And adding a guy like him to the trenches, you know, someone that's coming off one big year, taking a chance on him, maybe he accepts a 1-year deal and then tries to cash him when the cap goes up in 2022. That's the perfect case scenario for the Giants. He's a guy I would be all over if they manage to land him. That's where you can make the argument that you let Dalvin Tomlinson go. You know, you save the money, $10 million. Let's say you save the money and you allocate it toward a guy like Hassan Reddick, who just had a monster year, transferring back to outside linebacker, who can really be that stud edge for cheap for the Giants. Now the question is, does he want to leave? You know, does he want to leave Arizona? Maybe they offer him a deal because they do have a rookie contract with Kyler Murray too, so they're probably looking to spend, maybe have a little bit of money there. So we'll see what happens there. We'll keep an eye on Hassan Reddick, but there's a couple more guys. They're just, the issue is they're bigger names like Leonard Floyd, obviously Olivier Vernon, Shaquille Barrett, Bud Dupree, Melvin Ingram, Matt Judon. These are big names. They're going to be making big money and probably on multi-year deals. So I'm not investing. I don't think the Giants are going to be investing in that. We've seen what Patrick Graham can do with lesser talent. Take a chance on a guy like Reddick. Take a chance on a guy like Jordan Jenkins from the Jets, 27 years old, had 7 sacks in 2019, and then he was on the Jets last year and just kind of crapped the bed. These are the guys I see the Giants going after, you know, plug-in plays that are young, have potential, and are familiar with the outside linebacker position that Patrick Graham can coach up with some veterans around him. So I like that. I can see the Giants doing it. We'll see what they do there. But the last position group of the day is cornerback 2. This is one that really hurt the Giants all year long. You know, we know the Corey Ballantyne experiment failed after 1 week. They basically went from him playing 100% of snaps in week 1 to 40% in week 2, and then it was 0% the rest of the way. You know, Ryan Lewis, who tried to hold it down, he got injured, didn't get any playing time after that. Then you have the Isaac Yiadom experiment. He had a couple of games that looked okay, but for the most part, he was pretty lackluster. I don't feel confident rolling out with him again. And then you have Julian Love, who actually made a pretty good impact the last 2 games of the season. I thought he deserved a chance earlier on. I think that they were just waiting for Xavier McKinney to make his way back so they can move Julian Love back to CB2. I think that's kind of what they were waiting for. Finally, McKinney made his way back in like the last 2 weeks of the year, and they were able to move Love to CB2, where he's more comfortable. Ultimately, that's his traditional spot when he was playing for Notre Dame. And you know, he was one of the highest graded cornerbacks coming out of college. Dropped to the 4th round for the Giants. That's a really, really great steal for them. So I think, you know, he might be a player the Giants look at and say, you know, let's bring in another guy. Maybe let's draft a 3rd, 4th rounder and have them compete for it. Maybe even a 2nd rounder. We'll see what they do there. But there are a few free agents that they could look at. You know, maybe they could spend some money there. I'm not totally convinced that they will. To list some names, they have Jason McCourty, you know, from New England. I doubt they go for him. Mackenzie Alexander had a terrible year. So Mike Hilton, Michael Davis, Xavier Rhodes, Ronald Darby, Rashad Breeland. He's playing for the Chiefs right now. He might be a guy I would look at. He's probably pretty cheap. He's used to playing in big games now. He has the experience in the playoffs, so he's maybe someone I would look at. Gorion Conley, William Jackson, PJ Williams. There's some guys, they're not going to spend a ton of money here. It's going to be a cheaper contract, so we'll see what happens. But what do you think they do here? Do you think they go free agency with this, or they go for the draft?
Personally, I think in terms of CB2, they will go with the draft, or they will try to continue to develop homegrown talent, with Julian Love. Julian Love showed a lot of potential at CB2. I don't really know if there's a long-term future there. You and I have seemed to come to an agreement that Julian Love is just going to be a really solid depth piece that will be able to fill in multiple positions for the Giants whenever we have an injury or need an extra guy out there. He can play safety, slot, outside cornerback. Like, he can just move around, and I think that's really his best role, and I think he's really good at that, in terms of being a solid depth piece. But personally, I would like the Giants to just get one of those veteran corners, I'll just like a Joe Hayden. I'm not saying go after Joe Hayden, but like a Joe Hayden, one of those veteran cornerbacks that's going to be out there in free agency and will be willing to just take a 1-year deal because they're not even sure if they want to play football the following year. Just let them play that 1-year deal. That you're going to get average to above average performances out of them, but that's really all you need at CB2, especially when your CB1 is so good. But just sign one of those veterans, have him play average football at CB2 or slightly above average, because that's better than way below average, which is what we had there a lot of the times during the 2020 season. It started to get better. We had a revolving door at the position, Ballantyne, Ryan Lewis, Isaac Yiadom, Julian Love. Like, we had so many players start at that position this season. And I'd like to see the Giants just find a guy that they know can stay healthy, stay out there, play average football if they need him to, and maybe have a couple above average games down the stretch, Just get a veteran to play there. And then, of course, draft somebody in the middle to late rounds to develop there and see if you can hit on one of those flyers, one of those crapshoots later on in the draft at the cornerback position. I think that's personally what I would like to see the Giants do. I don't know if you agree, but really I think they should prioritize getting a veteran at the CB2 position for 2021.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of tired of the plug and plays at CB2. It cost us. It cost the Giants big time throughout the year. We saw it in the first game against Dallas when Ryan Lewis gave up that huge play to Michael Gallup, and they kicked the field goal to win the game. Like, we saw it routinely. Isaac Yiadom giving up touchdowns. This is something that was a problem and will continue to be a problem unless they find a solution. There are a bunch of veterans they could go after on just a 1-year deal. Joe Hayden, like you said, might be looking to retire. Come to our defense. We're going to have a top 10 unit. We're going to make a run to the playoffs. This is your chance. We're going to invest heavily in our offense. Finish your career here trying to win. So, that's kind of how I feel. I think you're right. I think the veteran, probably going with a veteran guy and then maybe drafting someone that can take over in 2022 would be the best case scenario. But then you have to remember, we also have Sam Beal. He's a guy that could be competing for the CB2 spot as well. You have Julian Love, you have Sam Beal, and Darnay Holmes trainer Brian Walker told us he thinks he can compete on the outside as well. He's not much smaller than Julian Love, so and he's fast, he's athletic, aggressive. I think maybe they give him a shot there, and they just draft a nickel corner who can slide in right there. So we'll see what happens. I think the draft is probably a lot easier to find a nickel corner, just someone to take over in the slot, than it is to find an outside guy. I would be totally fine giving Darnay Holmes the reins and trying to create a position battle between Holmes, Julian Love, and Sam Beal. Let those guys compete for it, because I think those are 3 talented players who could end up, really, really showing out. And maybe you don't even have to go out and sign a veteran. Maybe you already have the talent on the roster, and you never know how guys translate from year 1, year 2 to year 3. So we'll see how those things go. But I think those 3 priorities are probably in that order should be the focal point for the Giants: wide receiver, outside linebacker, and cornerback. Those are my 3 biggest weaknesses. That obviously free agency is going to be very telling about the draft, like we mentioned before, Anthony. But do you think, is there any other positions that you have in mind that you think we can add to the list, or do you think those are the 3 that we should be very focused on in free agency?
Those are the 3 that the Giants should focus on the most, but I do think that it wouldn't hurt them to add maybe a little bit of depth behind, our core 3 guys, assuming that they re-sign Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. It wouldn't hurt to have, We got B.J. Hill there, and I want to see Austin Johnson re-sign. That's really what I'm saying. I want a guy like Austin Johnson again who can step in when he needs to and have some solid reps. So some depth there, but more importantly, some depth at the linebacker position, the off-ball linebacker position. We had Tay Crowder, Mr. Irrelevant, starting opposite of Blake Martinez. He did a pretty good job, and he didn't look like a 7th-round pick. Certainly not a guy that almost went undrafted. He didn't look like that, but he didn't look like a 1st-round pick. He looked good, but I could see them potentially upgrading at that position if he's not able to develop and break out further and become an even better player in year 2. It's really all about how these guys develop. I think we have plenty of depth at edge rusher. We just don't have an actual good edge rusher. We just have a lot of good depth pieces. So it's all about finding that number 1 guy there. Safety position, though, the safety position, I have to say, I think we're all set there. I really like the core that we have there. Julian Love, Logan Ryan, Xavier McKinney, Jabril Peppers. What more can you ask for? You only have 2 starting safety positions anyway, and you have 4 guys that could realistically be capable starters out there. So, and then cornerback, we mentioned CB2. Absolutely, they have to prioritize that. And in the slot, I'm really confident in Darnay Holmes, whether he's in the slot or moves outside next year. We'll see, but I'm very confident in him. And then on the offensive side of the ball, we've mentioned the wide receiver position countless times. They need to upgrade it. They have to get some talent there. And then we'll see what happens with Wayne Gallman. We'll see if he re-signs. We'll see if the Giants need to find some more depth at running back, which they probably do. I'm really not that excited about having Alfred Morris continue to be the depth piece. I didn't really want Devontae Freeman. Giants fans wanted him. They got him. He really didn't do much for us. I never thought that he looked that good anyway, but, maybe a little depth there just for the assurance, no disrespect, but Saquon Barkley has been quite injured the past 2 seasons, so I'd like to see them, get somebody to play some solid football if it's not Wayne Gallman, if Saquon Barkley, God forbid, goes down with another injury. Tight end, maybe they gotta move on from Evan Engram. I don't know. That's a whole other debate, but, maybe they'll do something there. And then, like I mentioned way earlier in the video, the offensive line, absolutely I could see them adding some pieces there. Not even to replace anybody. You don't have to replace anybody, but realistically, Kevin Zeitler is a veteran. Drafting a guard even as early as the 2nd round just to sit behind Zeitler for a year even and then become the starter, realistically, that's a good idea, and I'm fine with that. So I could actually see them invest even further into the offensive line in the 2020 NFL draft. I don't think they do it in free agency, but in the draft, take a flyer on some of those mid-round guys and try and develop them to become starters on the offensive line in the future. I could definitely see them doing that.
Yeah, and one I'm going to throw in there, this is the last one, is backup quarterback. That's a depth piece I think the Giants might be looking to.
That's a good point.
There's a bunch of guys they could look to because, Colt McCoy, good, nothing special. We know what he offers us. We've already seen him start 2 games against Cleveland and Seattle. He won the game against Seattle, but it was really our defense that got it done in the running game. Wayne Gallman had a monster day. They had 190 yards on the ground. So I'm not going to say that I feel comfortable with Colt McCoy as our quarterback in case Daniel Jones goes down. And he has missed a couple games, in the past 2 years, 4 or 5 games. So I think it's fair to say, we need a backup quarterback just in case, whether it's Marcus Mariota, whoever. Someone that can run, someone who can operate the offense and do some unique things and isn't just going to stand in the pocket and everyone knows what's coming. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. So I think backup quarterback, another thing we can add to the list, but it's not the most pressing. I think it's probably 6th or 7th on the list, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think it's a huge deal. Well, honestly, no, you could probably put it higher up the list. The Giants do need a better backup quarterback. Colt McCoy is not going to get a job done. He got the job done, but we won that game not because of him. We just won that game with him, he didn't help us win that game, really. He did throw an interception that game, and then the Cleveland game, he had his moments where he looked pretty good, but, yeah, I think the Giants should absolutely find a good quarterback, especially because, again, no disrespect, like I said with Saquon Barkley, but Daniel Jones has been injured 2 seasons in a row now. We need to find the guy. God forbid he goes down with another injury, maybe one that's more significant, God forbid, like I said. But we got to get somebody behind him that we know can step in and not completely plummet our offense that was already playing really poorly, So, yeah, I think that's a pretty, I forgot that when I was running through all the positions, and then you mentioned, I was like, how the heck did I forget that? I completely agree. We have to prioritize a backup quarterback position. I really believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there you have it. That's pretty much the list of positions, players who we think the Giants might look at in free agency, where they should allocate draft resources. and really what positions are pressing right now so that they can be a playoff contending team in 2021. But as always, guys, thank you so much for the support. Head over to the YouTube channel if you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, whatever audio platform. Hit the subscribe button on everything because we're posting content every single day with film breakdowns and this and that. We're working with other YouTubers as well to bring more awesome content to you guys. So as always, thank you so much, and we will catch you guys on the next video.
TVSO.